Hello, Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous. I want to talk today about grief, the importance of it, how it is vital for our healing. Grief is not a comfortable subject in this culture or in many cultures, but it's so important to your healing, to your processing through this trauma of divorce in a healthy way that I want to talk about it a little bit today. It is one way in which you can support yourself in going through divorce. So let's start. I've got a list of questions here that I want to respond to. Why is grieving so important to our healing? Because it's happening within us, whether we recognize it or not. So it's pent up inside of us, this pain, this rejection, this betrayal that we feel. It's pent up inside of us. So if we don't let it out, then we carry it through. If we don't give it a healthy approach, we're going to carry it with us. It's going to come out in unnecessary times. It's going to be incorporated in our next relationship. It's going to influence how we continue through to live a healthy life. So that's why it's important. It is a vital step in going through this. And if you say, well, I haven't grieved, I would ask the question, have you given yourself permission to grieve? Or have you been one of those who feel like, I have to hold this stiff upper lip to get through this? And sometimes we're taught that, especially men, we don't know how to grieve. We can get angry. Anger we're used to. That's acceptable in us. But to grieve, to actually allow ourselves to feel the pain of what we're feeling, we don't give ourselves permission. So it's important for our healing because it's part of the process to get to the other side and be healthy. Next question. Giving yourself permission. How do you grieve? Once you've given yourself permission, how do you grieve? I know that seems like a really odd question, doesn't it? How do you grieve? Isn't it natural? It is, unless it has been squelched and stopped in years past. I think of a young neighbor child who lost his brother. And this is many years ago. He was struck by a car and killed. And he was never allowed to grieve that. Because back in that day, you weren't allowed as children to grieve. You weren't allowed to, because people said it would upset his mother. So don't grieve and don't cry. And then what happened to that grief? He just kind of pushed it inside and talked about it to me when he was in his mid-50s. And this had happened 40 some years ago. So he carried that inaccessibility to his grief along with him. So how do we grieve? When we give ourselves permission, we find a place where we are safe. Maybe it's with a paper and pencil. Maybe it's in a safe space near the water, walking along the beach. Maybe it's just secluded in our bedroom, in our closet, where we get real honest with ourselves and say, this hurts. This hurts tremendously. And we allow ourselves to start writing out those feelings. Journaling is a great way to grieve. To allow when those tears come, not to stop them. I know we're afraid of them because we are afraid they will swallow us up. But it's being honest with our body, with our spirit, with our emotions, that we let it come out. That's how we grieve. We are honest with ourselves. We give ourselves space to do it. We give ourselves tools to do it. Is a pen and paper a way that's going to help you grieve? Is it with a counselor who gives you, again, that permission, that safe space in which to grieve? In my support groups, we have time where we talk about grief. There is a safe space to say, this hurts. Oh, dear Jesus, this hurts. as a prayer and also a confession of what we are going through. The honesty of it is going to help us begin our healing. Why are we so afraid to grieve? Well, I think I explained that when I spoke about the little boy who had it squelched and was not given permission. We've been taught it's weak to grieve. It's not weak to grieve. It's human to grieve. So we must allow ourselves to do that. Next question, is it easier to leave trauma behind and honestly heal if we truly grieve the losses that happened to us? It is easier to leave the trauma behind. Why? Because we've talked about it and we've talked about it and we've talked about it. We have ruminated over it for a time. We're not stuck there, but we have dealt with it for a time. And then finally, we're going to look up and say, I'm done talking about it. I'm done. I don't need to talk about it anymore. And that's a beautiful benefit of taking the time to grieve, is we will get to a point to where you say, I don't need to be stuck here anymore. I've talked it out. I put every word there is with it. And now I don't need to talk about it anymore. I want to move forward because I've done my homework. I've done the homework I needed in addressing this trauma and this pain. Can you give us a story of someone you worked with who grieved and helped themselves in time of pain by grieving? I have numerous stories in support groups, in my one-on-one coaching with people, where they spent time, weeks, sometimes months, in addressing the grief and the pain that was within them. But they didn't stay there. They realized, again, I've addressed this, I've dealt with this, I felt every pain I can, I've described it in every which way. Now I want to move forward. I'm done with this. I'm done with this. And again, that's one of the benefits of grief, so you can get to the other side of the trauma of divorce. So I see lots of stories. I see stories of people who don't deny the grief and the pain. They address it head on. We know that some losses and trauma in our lives we'll never heal from. We have to live with them and move forward, rebuilding our lives with them. Can you give us some ways in which to help ourselves move forward? Well, we move forward again when we have addressed it, when we're honest with ourselves. And I will tell you, there are stories that I hear that still take me back. They take me back to the pain of 22 years ago of going through divorce. But it's a different perspective. I know it's there. I lived it. And there are some points of it that I can pick out and I can notify, but I'm not grieving it the way that I was back then. I see it as a perspective. It's never going to be erased from my heart, from my life, from my story. But it doesn't have the same impact on me. It doesn't paralyze me. It doesn't cripple me because I dealt with it. And as time moves forward and you begin to start looking forward instead of looking back all the time or looking in the present of the divorce and the pain, you get to a point, especially if you go through my programs, to where you turn that corner. Okay, let's move forward. Let's begin building my life after divorce. Divorce does not define me. It happened to me. It hurt. It's painful. It sucks. Now, let's move forward. So we'll take our story with us and that we will leverage it by the next time a friend or family member says, I'm going through a divorce, it touches you in a way it's not touched you before. You get it now. And you can use your story to help someone else go through this difficult journey. So in summary, grief is important. Don't deny it. Don't deny it. Process through it. Get the help if you need. But be honest with yourself, because you've got to be honest with yourself. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but here's where we grow. We'll never grow if we're not uncomfortable at times and vulnerable at times in safe spaces. Connect with me if I can be of help. This is Kathy Beatty, Divorce Support Anonymous.